I remember the exact moment I learned what a lie the Imperium truly is. Not the grand lie we all suspect, the one about the Emperor's supposed plan, or the nobility of eternal war. No, this was smaller, more intimate. The kind of lie that doesn't shake the foundations of a galaxy, but instead reveals what those foundations are built upon. Suffering, buried deep and kept quiet, deemed acceptable so long as the machine continues to function. My name is Apothecary Soren Vale, formerly of the Crimson Wardens chapter, and this is the account I will never submit to the reclusium. This is the record I keep for myself alone, so that when the weight of what I have done becomes unbearable, I can remind myself that I once believed I was doing the right thing. It began on a morning unremarkable in every way. I was 23 Terran years into my service, still considered junior by the standards of our order, though I had seen enough battlefields and cut open enough brothers to no longer flinch at the sight of enhanced flesh laid bare. I had earned my place in the apothecarian through diligence, not genius. I was thorough, obedient, unquestioning. The summons came during my morning cataloging of gene seed stocks deep within the fortress monastery's vaults. A servitor arrived, its vox grill crackling with the voice of Chief Apothecary Morek himself, a rare honor and an immediate source of dread. Morek did not speak to junior staff unless something had gone catastrophically wrong or required a scapegoat. Apothecary Vale, the servitor intoned in Morek's clipped, emotionless cadence. Report to Subvault Tiberian immediately. Dreadnought diagnostic required. Severity classification. Amber. Discretion mandated. The connection severed before I could ask for clarification. I sealed the gene seed vault and made my way through the labyrinthine corridors of our fortress monastery, a structure so ancient that entire wings had been forgotten, their purposes lost to time and neglect. Subvault Tiberian was one such place, a deep storage chamber for revered war machines no longer fit for active deployment. It was not a place of honor. It was where we kept our failures. The air grew colder as I descended. The hum of the fortress's systems faded into silence, replaced by the low, rhythmic thrum of stasis fields and ancient power conduits. The walls here were bare rock, unadorned by the banners and relics that decorated the upper halls. No one came here unless ordered. At the entrance to the subvault, I was met by Techmarine Varn, a stooped and irritable figure whose mechadendrites twitched with impatience. He did not greet me. He simply gestured toward the heavy blast doors and muttered, "It's been doing this for 3 weeks. We thought it was a power fluctuation, then a Vox system loop, then a corrupted logic engine. It's none of those things. What is it doing?" I asked. Varn's augmented eyes clicked and refocused. Screaming, the blast doors groaned open, and I stepped inside. The chamber was vast and dimly lit, filled with row upon row of dormant dreadnoughts, their sarcophagi sealed and silent. Most bore the scars of countless wars, burn marks, shattered armor plates hastily welded back together, kill markings etched into adamantium. These were not the honored ancients who still walked the battlefield. These were the forgotten, the broken, the ones whose injuries or obsolescence had rendered them unfit for war but whose spirits were too revered to dismantle entirely. At the far end of the chamber stood a single active unit. I recognized the pattern immediately, a Mark IV Castroferum-class dreadnought, one of the oldest still functional designs in the chapter's arsenal. Its armor was dull, unpainted, stripped of all iconography. Its posture was wrong, hunched forward slightly, as though the machine itself were exhausted. The status runes flickering across its sarcophagus housing were a chaotic mess of amber and red. And from somewhere deep within its core I heard it. A low, grinding sound. Not mechanical. Not entirely. It was a voice, distorted and stretched thin by vox corruption, repeating the same phrase over and over in a broken, arrhythmic loop. "Let me sleep. Let me sleep. Let me sleep. Let me sleep." I approached slowly, my diagnoster auspex already scanning the unit's vital signs. The readouts made no sense. Theta wave activity was off the scale, far too high for a dreadnought pilot in induced stasis. Neurological feedback was erratic, spiking and crashing in patterns consistent with extreme distress. The machine spirit integration protocols were Failing. No, not failing. They had never succeeded. How long has it been like this? I asked Varn, though I did not look away from the screen. 3 weeks since we noticed, Varn replied. But the logs suggest much longer. How much longer? Varn hesitated. 147 years. I stopped, turned, stared at him. That's impossible. No one could remain conscious in a Dreadnought sarcophagus for that long without full integration. The sensory deprivation alone would. I know what it would do, Varn snapped. I've read the same manuals you have. But the logs don't lie, apothecary. This unit was interred in the aftermath of the Vorten Crusade. It has been fully conscious since the moment of implantation. And it has been screaming on and off for a century and a half. My hands began to shake. I forced them still. Who is the pilot? I asked quietly. Varn accessed a nearby data lectern, his mechadendrites interfacing with the ancient cogitator banks. After a moment, he spoke. Brother Sergeant Cauldron, 5th Company, decorated veteran of the Vorten Crusade, critically wounded during the siege of Hive Malthus, interred by order of Chapter Master Vorian himself, declared a hero, honored in the Reclusium archives. And no one knew? Varn met my gaze. His augmented face betrayed no emotion, but I saw something flicker in his remaining organic eye. Someone knew, he said softly. They always know. I stood before the Dreadnought for a long time, listening to the broken mantra echoing from its vox grill. The sound wormed its way into my skull, repetitive and hollow, like the death rattle of something that should have been allowed to die long ago. Let me sleep. Let me sleep. Let me sleep. Varn had retreated to the far end of the chamber, muttering blessings to the Omnisia as he performed maintenance rites on a dormant machine. He did not want to be near this one. I did not blame him. I activated my personal data slate and began pulling diagnostic logs directly from the Dreadnought's internal systems. The machine spirit was sluggish, its responses delayed and fractured, but it complied. Slowly, the data began to populate across my screen, decades of operational reports, battle readiness assessments, neural integration metrics. And then I found it, buried deep within the tertiary logs, flagged as non-critical and marked for archival deletion after 2 centuries. A diagnostic entry dated 3 days after Brother Sergeant Cauldron's interment. Integration failure detected. Neural binding incomplete. Pilot consciousness sustained at 97% baseline. Machine spirit rejection confirmed. Recommendation: immediate extraction and RE interment with alternative sarcophagus unit. I read it twice, then a third time. Someone had known. From the very beginning, someone had known that Cauldron's mind had not merged with the Dreadnought's machine spirit, that he had remained fully, horribly conscious, trapped inside a coffin of steel and ceramite with no means of true rest, no way to sink into the blessed half-sleep that all Dreadnought pilots were supposed to experience between deployments. And they had done nothing. I scrolled further. Another entry, logged 5 days later, bore the seal of the chief apothecary at the time, a man named Theron, long since dead. Recommendation reviewed. Extraction deemed unnecessary. Unit combat operational. Pilot vitals stable. Continued monitoring authorized. No further action required. My jaw clenched. No further action required. Because the Dreadnought still functioned. Because Cauldron could still fight, still kill, still serve the chapter's tactical needs. His suffering was irrelevant. His mind, shattered and screaming, was irrelevant. What mattered was that the weapon worked. I forced myself to keep reading. Over the decades, the reports continued. Sporadic at first, then less frequent as the chapter's priorities shifted. Cauldron was deployed 7 times in the first 30 years, each deployment accompanied by brief notes indicating elevated stress markers and suboptimal neural feedback, but nothing that warranted intervention. After the 7th deployment, he was quietly reassigned to reserve status and eventually moved to Subvault Tiberian, where he had remained ever since. Forgotten, but not silent. The Vox logs showed intermittent bursts of communication, fragments of speech, most of it incoherent, occasionally forming recognizable words or phrases. Please, stop. Brothers. Why? And, most frequently, the phrase I was hearing now, let me sleep. No one had answered him. No one had even acknowledged the transmissions. The logs were flagged as anomalous Vox activity, categorized alongside equipment malfunctions and machine spirit glitches, and filed away without review. I closed the data slate and stood in silence, my mind struggling to process what I had just learned. This was not negligence. This was not oversight. This was a choice. Varn, I called out, my voice rougher than I intended. The tech marine looked up from his work. Who ordered Cauldron's interment? I already told you. Chapter Master Vorian. And who signed off on the integration diagnostics? Varn's mechadendrites stilled. Chief Apothecary Theron. And who reviewed Theron's findings? The Reclusium, the Chapter Council, the Master of the Forge. Varn's voice grew quieter. All of them. So they all knew. Yes. And they all decided his suffering was acceptable. Varn said nothing. He did not need to. I turned back to the Dreadnought. Cauldron's sarcophagus was still, save for the faint tremor of failing power conduits, but I could feel the weight of his presence, the broken, half-mad consciousness trapped within. How much of the man he had been still remained? How much had been ground away by decades of isolation, sensory deprivation, and unending wakefulness? Can he still understand us? I asked. Unknown, Varn replied. Neural degradation is severe, but his cognitive baseline remains partially intact. He may recognize speech. Whether he can form coherent responses is another matter. I stepped closer to the Dreadnought and activated its external Vox link. My voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by the ancient machinery. Brother Sergeant Cauldron, I said slowly, carefully. This is Apothecary Vale. I am here to help you. The screaming stopped. The silence that followed was worse. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with agonizing slowness, the Dreadnought's vocabulator crackled to life. The voice that emerged was raw, fractured, barely human. Help? Me? Yes, I said. I want to help you. Another pause. Longer this time. No one helps. No one listens. I'm listening now, I said. I've read the logs, Cauldron. I know what happened. I know they left you awake. I know you've been asking for help for 147 years. The Dreadnought shuddered. Its massive fists clenched and unclenched, hydraulics hissing. Why? The question hung in the air like a blade. I had no answer. Not one that would bring him comfort. Not one that would justify what had been done to him. Because they needed you to fight, I said quietly. And they thought your suffering was a price worth paying. I served. I bled. I know. Why won't they let me sleep? I looked at Varn. He shook his head slowly, his expression unreadable. I took a breath and made the decision that would define the rest of my life. They will, I said. I will make sure of it. I left Subvault Tiberian with a weight in my chest I could not name. Duty, rage, guilt, all of them, perhaps, tangled together into something that felt like drowning. Varn had said nothing as I departed, but the look he gave me was clear. You are making a mistake. Perhaps I was. I returned to my quarters and sealed the door behind me. The room was small, austere, little more than a cot, a desk, and a wall-mounted shrine to the Emperor. I had never given it much thought before. Now, staring at the gilded Aquila above my bed, I felt its gaze like an accusation. I sat at my desk and began composing a formal report to Chief Apothecary Morek. I chose my words carefully, stripping away emotion and focusing only on the facts. The failed neural integration, the diagnostic logs, the evidence of prolonged suffering, the clear medical justification for extraction and reinterment. I did not mention the initial report from Apothecary Theron. I did not mention the fact that the chapter's leadership had known from the beginning. Not yet. I needed to see how Morek would respond first. I submitted the report and waited. The reply came 6 hours later, delivered not by Vox but by a chapter serf who handed me a sealed data scroll and left without a word. I broke the wax seal and unrolled the parchment. Apothecary Vale, your report has been reviewed. The matter you have raised regarding Dreadnought Unit Cauldron is noted. However, full extraction and reinterment protocols require authorization from the chapter master and the reclusium. Such procedures are costly, time-intensive, and disruptive to chapter operations. Given that Unit Cauldron remains combat operational and poses no immediate threat to chapter assets, it has been determined that continued monitoring is the most prudent course of action. You are directed to adjust sedation protocols and Vox suppression filters to minimize distress signals. This matter is considered resolved. No further action is required. Chief Apothecary Morek. I read the message 3 times, each word carving itself deeper into my mind. Continued monitoring. Adjust sedation protocols. No further action required. They were going to do it again. They were going to leave him there, screaming, and simply turn down the volume so no one had to hear it. I crumpled the parchment in my fist. For the first time in my life, I understood what heresy felt like. The next morning, I did not return to Subvault Tiberian. Instead, I sought an audience with Master Chaplain Corvus, one of the few members of the reclusium I believed might listen. Corvus was ancient, over 4 centuries old, his face a labyrinth of scars and augmetics, his voice like grinding stone. He had fought in campaigns whose names I barely recognized, had seen the chapter through schisms and near-extinction events. If anyone in the fortress monastery possessed both the authority and the conscience to intervene, it was him. I found him in the Chapel of Martyrs, kneeling before a wall of bronze plaques bearing the names of the fallen. He did not turn as I entered, but he spoke. Apothecary Vale, you carry the stink of doubt. Speak. I hesitated, then stepped forward. Master Chaplain, I come to you regarding Brother Sergeant Cauldron, the Dreadnought in Subvault Tiberian. You know of him? I know of all our honored dead. Corvus rose to his feet, towering over me. What is your concern? I told him everything. The diagnostic logs, the failed integration, the century and a half of unbroken consciousness, the requests for help that were ignored, the order from Morek to suppress the distress signals and do nothing. When I finished, Corvus was silent for a long time. Then he walked to the wall of martyrs and placed one gauntlet hand against a name I could not read. Do you know what separates us from the enemies we fight, Apothecary? He asked. Faith, I said. Discipline. Purpose. Sacrifice, Corvus corrected. We exist to sacrifice. Our flesh. Our sanity. Our very souls, if the Emperor demands it. That is what it means to be Adeptus Astartes. To give everything without hesitation, without question. But Cauldron knew this when he took his oaths, Corvus continued, his voice hardening. He knew that the chapter's needs would always come before his own, that his suffering, however great, would be endured in silence if it served the Imperium. That is the burden of the warrior. He's not a warrior anymore, I said, my voice rising despite myself. He's a prisoner. He's been screaming for help for over a century, and no one has even acknowledged him. Is that honor? Is that the Emperor's will? Corvus turned to face me, his eyes burning with something I could not name. You ask the wrong questions, Apothecary. The Emperor's will is not concerned with one man's comfort. It is concerned with the survival of humanity. If Cauldron's suffering kept this chapter combat effective, if it allowed us to save even one more world, then his pain was justified. That is the calculus of war. That is the price of victory. And if we're wrong? I asked. If the Emperor looks upon what we've done and finds it abhorrent, then we will face his judgment with clear consciences, knowing we did what was necessary. I stared at him, my hands trembling. I don't believe that. Corvus stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Then you are a fool, and you will learn, as all of us have learned, that belief is a luxury we cannot afford. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the chapel. I returned to Subvault Tiberian that night, bypassing security with codes I should not have possessed and entering the chamber in darkness. Cauldron's Dreadnought stood where I had left it, hunched and silent. I approached slowly and activated the Vox link. "Cauldron," I said. "It's me, Apothecary Vale." The machine stirred. Its vocabulator crackled to life. "You returned." "I did. I'm gonna get you out of there, Cauldron. I swear it. They won't let you." "I don't care." A sound emerged from the Dreadnought, something between a laugh and a sob. Then, "You are a fool." "Maybe," I said, "but I'd rather be a fool than a coward." Took me 4 weeks to gather what I needed. 4 weeks of quiet disobedience, of stealing moments between duties to sift through archives and forge connections with those few souls in the fortress monastery who still possessed something resembling a conscience. I was careful, methodical. I left no obvious trails, requested no permissions, and asked no direct questions that might raise suspicion. But I was not subtle enough. On the 29th day, I was summoned to the Chamber of Deliberation, a windowless room deep within the reclusion where matters of internal discipline were addressed. I had never been inside it before. I had heard stories. Chief Apothecary Morek was waiting for me, flanked by 2 members of the chapter council, Master of Sanctity Hadrian and Forge Master Dravik. All 3 wore expressions of cold disapproval. Morek gestured to a chair in the center of the room. "Sit." I obeyed. "You have been conducting unauthorized research," Morek began without preamble. "You have accessed restricted archives, requisitioned diagnostic equipment without approval, and attempted to contact members of the reclusion regarding a matter you were explicitly ordered to drop. Explain yourself." I met his gaze and did not flinch. "I am attempting to correct a medical injustice." "You are attempting to undermine chapter authority," Hadrian interjected, his voice like grinding gravel. "You presume to question decisions made by your superiors, decisions made in the best interests of the chapter and the Imperium. I question decisions made in disregard of a warrior's suffering," I replied. "Brother Sergeant Cauldron has been fully conscious inside a failing Dreadnought for over a century. He has asked for help repeatedly. We have ignored him. That is not discipline. That is cruelty. That is necessity," Dravik said, leaning forward. His augmetic eyes clicked and refocused, scanning me as though I were a malfunctioning servitor. "Cauldron's Dreadnought remains combat operational. Extraction and reinterment would cost the chapter months of labor, significant resources, and the loss of a functional war engine during that period. What you call cruelty, we call triage. We prioritize the many over the one." "Then let me extract him," I said. "Grant me the resources and authorization. I will perform the procedure myself. I will take full responsibility." Morek's expression darkened. "You are a junior apothecary. You have neither the experience nor the authority to perform a Dreadnought extraction. Then assign someone who does." Apothecary Theron performed the original interment. "Surely there are others capable of reversing it." "Theron is dead," Morek said flatly, "and those who might possess the necessary skill are deployed across the segmentum. We will not recall them for a single case." "A single case of torture," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "You speak of triage, but this is not triage. This is abandonment. This is a man who gave everything for the chapter, and we repaid him by leaving him to rot in silence." Hadrian slammed his gauntlet fist on the table, the sound echoing through the chamber like a thunderclap. "Enough! You speak of abandonment, apothecary, but what you propose is worse. You would have us waste precious time and resources on sentiment. You would have us weaken the chapter to salve your conscience. That is not mercy. That is cowardice disguised as compassion." I forced myself to remain calm, though my hands were shaking. "If we cannot show mercy to our own brothers, then what are we fighting for?" "We fight for the Imperium," Dravik said coldly. "For humanity's survival. Individual suffering is irrelevant in the face of extinction. You know this apothecary. It is the foundation of everything we are." "Then perhaps," I said quietly, "we have built our foundation on a lie." The silence that followed was absolute. Morek stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "You are relieved of your duties, Apothecary Vale. You will confine yourself to quarters until further notice. If you attempt to contact anyone regarding this matter, if you so much as approach Subvault Tiberian again, you will be declared in breach of chapter law and dealt with accordingly. Do you understand?" I stood and met his gaze. "Yes, Chief Apothecary. I understand." "Then go." I turned and walked out of the chamber, my mind already racing. Confinement lasted 3 days. I spent those days in silence, staring at the ceiling of my quarters and running through every possible course of action. I could submit to the chapter's will and let Cauldron scream until his mind finally broke. I could attempt to escalate the matter to the chapter master directly, though I doubted I would even gain an audience. Or I could do the unthinkable. I could act without permission. On the third night, I made my choice. I waited until the Fortress Monastery's night cycle reached its deepest point, when even the chapter serfs were asleep and the corridors were patrolled only by automated servitors. I disabled the lock on my quarters with a combination of gene-coded overrides and brute force, slipping into the hallway and making my way toward the Apothecarian. The Medici wing was deserted. I moved quickly, gathering the tools I would need: neural interface kits, surgical implements, sedative compounds, emergency stasis caskets. I packed everything into a portable Medici case and slung it over my shoulder. Then I descended into Subvault Tiberian. The blast doors were sealed, but I had memorized the access codes during my previous visits. The locks disengaged with a hiss, and I stepped inside. Cauldron's Dreadnought stood in the darkness, silent and still. For a moment I thought he had finally succumbed, that his mind had broken and left only the machine. Then the Vox grill crackled to life. "You came. I told you I would," I said, setting down my equipment and activating a portable lumen. "I'm gonna get you out, Cauldron. Tonight. They will kill you." "Probably," I admitted. "But I'd rather die doing the right thing than live knowing I did nothing." I began the process of interfacing with the Dreadnought sarcophagus, bypassing security protocols and accessing the neural cradle that held Cauldron's broken body. The readouts were worse than I had feared. His vitals were barely stable. His neural pathways were degraded to the point of collapse. Extracting him would be agonizing, and there was no guarantee he would survive. But leaving him here was not an option. "Will it hurt?" Cauldron asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," I said honestly. "But it will be the last time." "Good. I am tired of pain." I activated the extraction sequence, and then the alarms began to scream. The Fortress Monastery came alive around me like a wounded beast. Klaxons wailed through the corridors, their shrill pitch reverberating through the stone and steel. Red warning lights bathed Subvault Tiberian in crimson, casting jagged shadows across the rows of dormant dreadnoughts. My hands did not stop moving. I could not afford hesitation now. Cauldron's sarcophagus hissed as the neural cradle began to disengage, hydraulic locks releasing one by one with agonizing slowness. The machine's internal systems fought me at every step, safeguards and fail-safes triggering in sequence, each one designed to prevent exactly what I was attempting. "They are coming." Cauldron's voice was faint, distorted by the extraction process. "Leave me. Save yourself." "No," I said through gritted teeth, overriding another security protocol. "I'm not leaving you." The blast doors at the chamber's entrance groaned and began to open. I had seconds, maybe less. The neural cradle disengaged with a wet, mechanical thunk, and the sarcophagus split open like a broken tooth. Inside, suspended in a web of cables and life support tubes, was what remained of Brother Sergeant Cauldron. I had seen many things in my years as an apothecary. I had dissected orcs, studied the twisted physiology of chaos-corrupted flesh, extracted gene seed from brothers whose bodies had been reduced to little more than meat and shattered bone. But nothing had prepared me for this. Cauldron's body was a ruin. His limbs had been amputated centuries ago, the stumps capped with neural interface ports that burrowed into the Dreadnought's control systems. His torso was a lattice of scar tissue and augmetics. His chest cracked open and replaced with machinery that kept his hearts beating and his lungs drawing air. His face was the worst, half-fleshed and half-skull. One eye replaced with a crude augmetic lens, the other wide and staring and utterly, horribly aware. He looked at me, and he wept. Not tears. His tear ducts had been removed long ago, but the sound that emerged from his ruined throat was unmistakable. A sob. A release of a century and a half of agony that no words could contain. I reached into the sarcophagus and began disconnecting the life support systems, my hands moving with frantic precision. Each cable I severed brought him closer to death, but also closer to freedom. I had prepared a portable stasis casket, a last-ditch measure designed to keep him alive long enough for proper reinterment. If I could just get him into it. The blast doors slammed open. Chief Apothecary Morek strode into the chamber, flanked by 2 assault marines in full-power armor. Behind them came Tech Marine Varn, his face twisted in something that might have been regret. He avoided my gaze. "Step away from the Dreadnought, Vale," Morek commanded, his voice cold and absolute. "This ends now." I did not stop. My hands continued their work, severing the last of the neural connections. Cauldron's body convulsed, his remaining muscles spasming as the systems that had kept him alive for so long began to fail. "I said step away," Morek repeated, his tone darkening. "He's dying," I said, my voice trembling with exhaustion and rage. "If I stop now, he dies. If you want to punish me, fine. But let me finish this first. Let me give him peace." Morek gestured to the assault marines. "Remove him." They moved forward, their movements swift and efficient. One seized me by the arm and hauled me backward, my grip on the surgical tools slipping. I fought, screaming, but it was useless. They were space marines, gen-hanced and armored. I was nothing. "No!" I shouted, struggling against their grip. "You can't. He's still alive. He's still." Morek stepped past me and examined the open sarcophagus. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached down and pressed a control rune on the neural cradle. The life support systems reactivated. The cables I had severed began retracting, self-sealing mechanisms kicking in, dragging Cauldron's broken body back into the Dreadnought's embrace. He screamed, a raw, animal sound that echoed through the chamber, and the assault marines holding me flinched. Morek did not. "You were given an order, Vale," he said quietly, his back still turned to me. "You were told to leave this alone, and you defied that order. Do you understand what you have done? You have jeopardized chapter security. You have wasted resources. You have placed your personal feelings above the needs of the Imperium." "I tried to save him," I shouted, my voice breaking. "I tried to give him what he's been begging for." "You tried to play hero," Morek interrupted, turning to face me. His expression was not angry. It was disappointed. Worse than anger. "And in doing so, you have proven yourself unfit for the responsibility you were given." He gestured to the assault marines. "Take him to the detention cells. He will await judgment from the chapter master." They dragged me out of the chamber. The last thing I saw before the blast doors sealed shut was Cauldron's sarcophagus closing around him once more, the machine swallowing him whole. And I heard his voice one final time, faint and broken, echoing through the Vox system. "Why?" "I spent 7 days in the detention cells. They were not cruel. The Crimson Wardens did not torture their own, at least not physically. I was given food, water, and a cot to sleep on. But I was also left entirely alone, with nothing but my thoughts and the weight of my failure. I had tried to save him. I had risked everything. My position, my honor, perhaps even my life, and I had failed. Cauldron was still trapped, still screaming, and I had accomplished nothing except proving that the chapter's hierarchy was stronger than any one man's conscience. On the 8th day, the door to my cell opened. I expected Morek, or Hadrian, or perhaps an executioner. Instead, I saw Chapter Master Vorian himself. He was a giant even among space marines, his armor ancient and ornate, inscribed with the names of victories spanning 3 centuries. His face was severe, carved from stone and scarred by countless battles. He did not speak immediately. He simply stood in the doorway, studying me as one might study an insect. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Apothecary Vale," he said, his voice low and resonant. "You have put me in a difficult position." I said nothing. What was there to say? Vorian walked to the far wall and stood with his back to me. "I have read your reports. I have reviewed the diagnostic logs. I have spoken with Morek, with Hadrian, with every member of the chapter council. And I have concluded that you are both right and wrong." I looked up, startled. "You are right," Vorian continued. "That Brother Sergeant Cauldron has suffered, that his interment was flawed, that we, as his brothers, failed him." He turned to face me. "But you are wrong to believe that this failure negates the necessity of what was done. Cauldron was a weapon, a tool. And tools, apothecary, do not retire simply because they are damaged. They are repaired, repurposed, used until they break." "He's not a tool," I said hoarsely. "He's a man." "He was a man," Vorian corrected. "He became something else the moment he took his oaths. Just as you did. Just as I did. We are no longer men, Vale. We are instruments of the Emperor's will. And instruments do not have the luxury of mercy." "Then what are we?" I asked bitterly. "If we can't show mercy to our own, what separates us from the monsters we fight?" Vorian was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice was quieter than before. "Nothing," he said. "Nothing at all." He turned and walked toward the door. Then he paused. "I am going to give you a choice, apothecary. You can accept your punishment, reduction in rank, reassignment to a penal company, and a black mark on your record that will follow you for the rest of your service. Or," he looked back at me, "or you can fix this." I stared at Chapter Master Vorian, uncertain I had heard him correctly. "Fix it," I repeated, my voice hoarse. "What do you mean?" Vorian's expression did not change. "I mean exactly what I said. You believe Brother Sergeant Cauldron deserves mercy. Very well. I am giving you the authority to extract him, reinter him properly, and grant him the rest he has been denied. You will have access to whatever resources you require. Tekmarine Varn will assist you. You will have 1 week." I struggled to process his words. "Why? Why would you?" "Because you were right," Vorian said simply. "Not about everything. Not about the chapter's methods or the necessity of sacrifice. But about Cauldron. He has served long enough. He has earned his rest. And if granting him that rest will put an end to this matter, then so be it." Relief flooded through me, so overwhelming I nearly collapsed. "Thank you, Chapter Master." But," Vorian interrupted, his tone hardening. "There is a condition." The relief evaporated. "The records of Cauldron's failed integration will be sealed," Vorian continued. "Permanently. The diagnostic logs, the reports, the evidence of the chapter's initial decision, all of it will be expunged from the archives. As far as official history is concerned, Cauldron's extraction is a routine medical procedure, performed because his sarcophagus suffered irreparable mechanical failure. Do you understand?" I understood. He was offering me a deal. Cauldron would be saved, but the truth would be buried. The chapter's failure, the deliberate choice to leave a brother suffering for over a century, would be erased, hidden away so that no one would ever know what had been done. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. Vorian's gaze did not waver. "Then you will be charged with insubordination, dereliction of duty, and attempted destruction of chapter property. You will be stripped of your rank and gene seed, and Cauldron will remain exactly where he is." I felt something inside me break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap, like a cable fraying under too much weight. I had a choice. I could refuse, cling to my principles, and condemn both myself and Cauldron to damnation. Or I could accept the bargain, save one man's life, and become complicit in the very system I had sought to defy. There was no third option. "I accept," I said, the words tasting like ash. Vorian nodded once. Good. You have 1 week. Do not waste it. He turned and left the cell, the door sealing shut behind him. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at my hands. The extraction took 5 days. Techmarine Varn and I worked in near silence, moving through the procedure with grim efficiency. The process was delicate, agonizing, and required every shred of skill I possessed. Cauldron's body was so deeply integrated with the Dreadnought systems that separating them felt less like surgery and more like exorcism. On the first day, we disconnected the primary neural interfaces, severing the links that bound his mind to the machine spirit. Cauldron screamed through the entire process, his consciousness flickering in and out as we worked. I sedated him as much as I dared, but too much would risk neurological collapse. He had to remain partially aware, no matter how much it hurt. On the second day, we began removing the life support systems embedded in his chest and spine. Each component was fused to his flesh, held in place by scar tissue and centuries-old augmetics. We cut carefully, using plasma scalpels and melta-torches to peel away the machinery without killing him outright. His vitals crashed twice. Both times we resuscitated him. On the third day, we extracted what remained of his organic body from the sarcophagus. It was horrifying. His legs were gone, amputated at the hips. His arms ended in jagged stumps wrapped in corroded metal. His torso was a patchwork of flesh, bone, and machinery, barely recognizable as human. We placed him in a stasis casket to stabilize his condition while we prepared the new sarcophagus. On the fourth day, Varn and I worked to configure a replacement Dreadnought chassis, one with a properly functioning machine spirit and neural integration protocols that would allow Cauldron to finally sink into the half-sleep that all pilots were meant to experience. It was slow, tedious work, calibrating every system to ensure compatibility. On the fifth day, we reinterred him. The procedure was smoother this time. The new sarcophagus accepted his body without resistance, the neural interfaces bonding cleanly, the machine spirit responding to his presence with something that almost felt like welcome. I monitored the integration protocols in real time, watching as Cauldron's brainwave activity began to stabilize, shifting from the chaotic, hyperactive patterns of unbroken consciousness into the slow, rhythmic waves of induced sleep. For the first time in 147 years, Brother Sergeant Cauldron was at rest. I stood before the newly sealed Dreadnought, my hands trembling with exhaustion. Varn placed a mechadendrite on my shoulder, a gesture that might have been reassurance or simply acknowledgement. "It is done," he said. "Yes," I replied quietly. "It is done." But it did not feel like victory. Chapter Master Vorian summoned me 2 days later. I stood before him in the Hall of Ancients, a vast chamber lined with the banners of fallen heroes. He was seated on a throne of black stone, flanked by members of the chapter council. Chief Apothecary Morek was there, his expression unreadable. So was Master Chaplain Corvus, his scarred face twisted into something that might have been approval or contempt. "Apothecary Vale," Vorian began, his voice echoing through the hall. "You have completed the task I assigned you. Brother Sergeant Cauldron has been successfully reinterred and is now resting in peace. For this, the chapter thanks you." I said nothing. "However," Vorian continued, "you must also understand the gravity of the agreement you made. The records of Cauldron's original interment and the circumstances surrounding it have been sealed. You are forbidden from discussing this matter with anyone, under any circumstances. To do so would constitute a breach of chapter security and will be met with the harshest possible consequences. Do you understand?" "I understand, Chapter Master," I said. "Good." Vorian leaned forward slightly. "You are reinstated to your position as apothecary, with full privileges and responsibilities. You will return to your duties immediately. This matter is closed." I hesitated. "And if it happens again?" The chamber fell silent. Vorian's gaze sharpened. "What did you say?" "If another Dreadnought suffers a failed integration," I said slowly, carefully. "If another brother is left conscious when he should not be, what then?" Morek stepped forward, his voice cold. "Such cases are exceedingly rare, Apothecary. The likelihood of—" "What then?" I repeated, my voice rising. Do we leave them to scream? Do we pretend we don't hear them? Or do we fix it? Vorian stood. The sheer weight of his presence filled the hall, and I felt myself shrink beneath it. If such a case arises, he said slowly, it will be addressed on an individual basis, as it has always been. Quietly, I said bitterly, without record, without accountability. Yes, Vorian said, quietly, because that is what is necessary. I looked around the chamber, at the faces of the chapter council, at the banners of the fallen, at the gilded Aquila watching from above, and I realized that nothing had changed. I had saved one man, but the system that had broken him, that had deemed his suffering acceptable, remained intact. It would continue. Others would suffer as Cauldron had suffered, and they, too, would be saved only if someone like me risked everything to act. And I would be complicit in it, because I had made my choice. I bowed my head. Yes, Chapter Master, I understand. Good, Vorian said. Then you are dismissed. I turned and walked out of the hall, the weight of my decision settling over me like a shroud. I did not see Brother Sergeant Cauldron again. After his reinterment, he was relocated to the Hall of Honored Ancients, a sacred chamber reserved for dreadnoughts deemed worthy of veneration. He stood among legends now, warriors whose names were inscribed in the chapter's most hallowed records, whose deeds had shaped the fate of entire campaigns. To any outsider, his placement there would seem fitting, a recognition of service, a final honor. But I knew the truth. He had been hidden in plain sight. His new sarcophagus bore no marks of his suffering, no record of the failed integration, no mention of the century and a half he had spent screaming for help. The plaques affixed to his chassis spoke only of valor, of battles won, enemies slain, worlds saved. They called him a hero. They called him blessed. They did not call him what he truly was, a victim. I wanted to hate them for it, Vorian, Morek, the council, but I could not, because I had enabled it. I had agreed to bury the truth. I had chosen one man's peace over the possibility of justice for all who might come after him. And so I returned to my duties. The weeks that followed were quiet. I resumed my work in the apothecarian, cataloging gene seed, tending to wounded brothers, performing the countless small rituals that kept the chapter's biological infrastructure functioning. I did not speak of Cauldron. I did not seek out Varn, who had returned to his forges and his machines. I did not question orders. I was a model apothecary, and I hated every moment of it. The other apothecaries noticed, of course. My demeanor had changed. I was quieter, more withdrawn. I performed my duties with mechanical precision, but there was no passion in it, no sense of purpose. I had become what I had always feared, a cog in a machine, turning endlessly, producing nothing but the illusion of function. One evening, as I was sealing a batch of gene seed vials, Chief Apothecary Morek entered the vault. He did not announce himself. He simply stood in the doorway watching me work. "You are troubled, Vale?" he said after a long silence. I did not look up. "I am fine, Chief Apothecary." "No, you are not." Morek stepped closer, his footsteps echoing through the vault. "You believe you made the wrong choice." I paused, my hands stilling over the vials. "I saved a man's life." "Yes, and in doing so, you became complicit in the system you sought to challenge. You made a bargain with your conscience, and now you cannot reconcile what you have done." Morek's voice was not unkind, but neither was it sympathetic. It was simply matter-of-fact. "You are not the first apothecary to face this dilemma, Vale, and you will not be the last." I turned to face him. "Did you ever face it?" Morek's expression did not change. "Every day." The admission hung in the air between us. "I have been chief apothecary of this chapter for over a century," Morek continued. "In that time, I have saved thousands of lives. I have also made decisions that condemned men to suffering I could have prevented. I have chosen the many over the few, the chapter over the individual, the mission over the man. And every time, I have asked myself the same question you are asking now. Was it worth it? And, I asked quietly, was it? Morek looked away. "I do not know. I tell myself it was. I tell myself that every brother I saved, every battle we won, justified the choices I made. But at night, when the fortress is silent and I am alone with my thoughts, I hear their voices. The ones I could have saved. The ones I chose not to. He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I had not expected. Doubt. You saved Cauldron Vale. You gave him peace. But you also ensured that the next man who suffers as he did will have no voice. No advocate. No one willing to risk what you risked. That is the price of your mercy. And you will carry it for the rest of your life. He turned and walked toward the door. Then he paused. The question you must answer now, apothecary, is this: will you let that price break you? Or will you use it to become something better than what you were? He left without waiting for an answer. I stood in the vault for a long time, staring at the rows of gene seed vials. And I made a decision. I began to watch. Quietly, carefully. I monitored the chapter's dreadnoughts, cross-referencing deployment records with diagnostic reports, searching for patterns that might indicate failed integrations. I did not make my inquiries obvious. I framed them as routine medical reviews as part of my duties. No one questioned me, and I found others. Not many. The technology behind Dreadnought interment was ancient and well-tested. Failures were rare, but they existed. Over the next year, I identified 3 cases similar to Cauldron's. Brothers who had remained partially or fully conscious after interment, their neural integration incomplete or degraded. None had been screaming. None had been as obvious as Cauldron had been. But the signs were there, buried in diagnostic logs marked non-critical and filed away without review. I brought each case to Morek, and each time he listened. He did not approve my requests immediately. He did not authorize extractions or reinterments without question. But he also did not dismiss me. He reviewed the evidence I presented, consulted with the tech marines, and, in each case, made the decision to act. Quietly, without fanfare, without record, we saved them, one by one. We extracted them from their failing sarcophagi, granted them proper rest, and buried the truth just as we had buried Cauldron's. The chapter's honor remained intact. The records remained pristine. And the brothers who might have suffered as Cauldron had suffered were spared. But the system did not change. Could not change. To acknowledge the problem openly would be to admit failure, to reveal that the chapter's sacred rites of interment were fallible, that the honored ancients might be suffering, that the very foundation of our reverence for the dreadnoughts was built on a lie. And so we continued, Morek and I, 2 men working in silence, saving those we could while the machine ground on around us. It was not justice, but it was something. 5 years passed. In that time I saved 11 brothers. 11 men who, like Cauldron, had been trapped in failing dreadnoughts, their minds unmoored from the machines they were meant to merge with. 11 cases that should never have occurred but did. 11 lives that the chapter would have deemed acceptable losses if I had not intervened. I did not keep a record. I could not. The agreement I had made with Vorian forbade it. But I remembered each name, each face, each moment when the sarcophagus opened and I saw the relief in their eyes as they realized, finally, that someone had heard them. Morek became my silent partner in this work. He never acknowledged it openly. We never discussed it outside of the necessary logistical conversations. But he protected me. When questions were raised about my frequent requisitions of stasis caskets or my unusual access to Subvault Tiberian, he deflected them. When members of the chapter council grew suspicious of the number of routine maintenance procedures I was performing on dreadnoughts, he vouched for me. He never said why, but I think I understood. He, too, carried the weight of those he could not save. And in helping me save others, he was trying to atone. The 12th case broke me. His name was Brother Hadris, a dreadnought pilot interred after the siege of Vorchek, a brutal campaign against an Orc Waak that had lasted nearly 2 decades. Hadris had been a chaplain before his interment, a man of faith, discipline, and unshakable conviction, the kind of warrior who embodied everything the chapter aspired to be. His dreadnought had been deployed 17 times since his interment. Each time he had fought with distinction. Each time, his brothers had praised his fury and his righteousness. And each time, according to the diagnostic logs I uncovered, he had been fully conscious. He had been awake for 34 years. I brought the case to Morek expecting the usual process: review, approval, extraction. But this time, Morek hesitated. "Hadris is still combat effective," he said, staring at the data slate I had given him. "His integration failure has not impacted his operational capacity. In fact, his kill count is among the highest in the chapter." "That's not the point," I said. "He's suffering. He's been awake for over 3 decades. We need to extract him." Morek set down the data slate and looked at me. "If we extract him, we lose a chaplain Dreadnought. Do you understand what that means, Vale? Hadris is not just a weapon. He is a symbol, a spiritual anchor for the brothers who fight alongside him. If we remove him from service, it will raise questions. Questions we cannot afford to answer. Then we lie," I said, my voice rising. "We tell them it was a mechanical failure. We've done it before. We can do it again." "We have done it 11 times, Morek corrected. "And each time we take a risk. Each time we come closer to being discovered. How long do you think we can continue this, Vale? How long before someone asks why so many dreadnoughts are suffering routine mechanical failures? How long before the chapter council demands an audit?" "I don't care," I said. "Hadris deserves." "Hadris is a chaplain," Morek interrupted, his voice hardening. "He swore the same oaths you did, to sacrifice, to endure, to serve without question. If we ask him, he will tell us to leave him where he is. He will say that his suffering is meaningless compared to the chapter's needs. And he will be right." I stared at him, my hands trembling. "You're saying we should leave him?" "I am saying," Morek said slowly, "that we must consider the cost of saving him, not just to us, to the chapter, to the brothers who rely on him, to the Imperium. And if the cost is too high?" I asked bitterly. "Then we do what we have always done," Morek said. "We make the hard choice." I turned and walked out of his office. I went to see Hadris that night. His dreadnought stood in the Hall of Honored Ancients, silent and still, his sarcophagus decorated with purity seals and litanies of faith. I activated the external Vox link and spoke. "Brother Hadris, this is Apothecary Vale. I need to speak with you." For a long moment, there was no response. Then the dreadnought stirred, and a voice emerged from its vocabulator. Deep, resonant, and utterly weary. "Apothecary, what do you want?" "I want to help you," I said. "I've read your diagnostic logs. I know you've been awake. I know you've been suffering. I can extract you. I can give you rest." Another pause. "No," Hadris said. I blinked. "What?" I said no. The dreadnought shifted slightly, its massive frame creaking. "I am aware of my condition, Apothecary. I have been aware of it since the moment of my interment, and I have chosen to endure it." "But I am a chaplain," Hadris interrupted. "My purpose is to inspire faith in my brothers, to stand as a symbol of the Emperor's will. If I am extracted, I cease to fulfill that purpose. My suffering becomes meaningless. Do you understand, Apothecary? My pain has value because it serves the chapter. To remove me is to strip that pain of its meaning." I felt something twist inside me. "You shouldn't have to suffer for meaning." "We all suffer for meaning," Hadris replied. "That is what it means to serve the Imperium. You know this. You have made the same choice I have. You have buried the truth to save others. You have become complicit in the system you once hated. And you have done so because you believe the alternative is worse. You are no different from me, Apothecary," Hadris said, his voice softening. "You are simply still trying to convince yourself that you made the right choice. But the truth is, there is no right choice. There is only the choice we can live with." I stood in silence, unable to respond. "Go," Hadris said. "Tend to those who want your help. Leave me to my duty." The Vox link cut off. I left the hall and did not return. The next morning, I submitted a report to Morik stating that Brother Hadras's condition was stable and required no immediate intervention. He did not question it, and I did not bring it up again. 10 more years passed. I continued my work, saving those I could, burying the truth for those I couldn't. I became efficient, practiced, numb. The moral weight that had once crushed me became something I learned to carry, a burden so familiar it no longer felt like a burden at all. I stopped asking whether what I was doing was right. I simply did it. Morik aged. Not visibly, Space Marines aged slowly, if at all, but in other ways. He grew quieter, more distant. He delegated more of his duties to me, trusting me to handle cases that once would have required his direct oversight. He never said it aloud, but I think he was grooming me to replace him. I did not want the position, but I did not refuse it. On the day of my 50th year of service, Morik summoned me to his office. He looked older than I had ever seen him, his face lined with exhaustion, his movements slow and deliberate. He gestured for me to sit. "I am stepping down," he said without preamble. "The chapter master has approved my request to retire to the Apothecarian Archives. I will spend the remainder of my service cataloging our records and training the next generation." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because I am tired, Vale," he said simply. "I have carried this burden for over a century. I have saved thousands of lives and condemned hundreds more. I have made choices I will never be able to justify, and I have lived with the consequences of those choices every day. And I cannot do it anymore." He leaned forward, his eyes meeting mine. "You will be named Chief Apothecary in my place. The Council has already approved it. You have earned it, Vale. Not because you are the most skilled, not because you are the most experienced, but because you understand the cost of this position. And because I believe you will carry it better than I did." "I don't want it," I said quietly. "I know," Morik replied. "But you will take it anyway, because there is no one else who can." He stood and extended his hand. I took it. As Chief Apothecary, I had access to records I had never seen before. Comprehensive logs of every Dreadnought interment in the chapter's history. Diagnostic reports spanning centuries. Casualty assessments. Gene seed extraction protocols. And buried among them, hidden in subfiles marked classified and need to know, I found the full scope of the lie I had been perpetuating. Cauldron had not been the first. There had been others. Dozens of others. Stretching back over 400 years. Cases of failed integrations, partial consciousness, prolonged suffering. Some had been corrected quietly, as I had done. Others had been left to endure until their bodies finally gave out. And every single case had been buried. I sat in the archives for 3 days, reading through the records, cross-referencing names and dates, piecing together a pattern that should never have existed. The chapter knew. They had always known. The failed integrations were not anomalies. They were statistical inevitabilities, rare but predictable. The technology was ancient, the rituals imperfect, the biology unpredictable. Failures occurred, and when they did, the chapter made a choice. Save the man or save the machine. They almost always chose the machine, and I had helped them. For 15 years, I had been part of the system. I had saved individuals, yes, but I had also ensured that the system itself remained intact. That the lie continued. That future brothers would suffer just as Cauldron had suffered, because no one would ever be held accountable. I closed the archives and returned to my office, and I made a decision. I began training junior apothecaries in the techniques I had developed. Not openly, not officially, but quietly, one-on-one during routine mentorship sessions. I taught them how to identify the signs of failed Dreadnought integrations, how to read diagnostic logs for subtle anomalies, how to approach the chapter council with requests for extraction without raising suspicion. I did not tell them the full truth. I could not. The oath I had sworn to Vorian still bound me, but I gave them the tools they would need to do what I had done, to save the ones who could be saved, and to bury the truth when necessary. It was not justice, but it was something. On the 63rd year of my service, I received a message from the Hall of Honored Ancients. Brother Sergeant Cauldron had awakened. I arrived at the hall within minutes, my heart pounding in my chest. Cauldron's Dreadnought stood in the same place it had for decades, but now its status runes were active, its systems fully operational. I activated the Vox link. "Cauldron," I said, "can you hear me?" The response came immediately, the voice clear and steady. "Apothecary Vale. I remember you." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "How do you feel?" "Rested," Cauldron said. And then, after a pause, "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "I should have." "You saved me," Cauldron interrupted. "You risked everything to give me peace. I will never forget that." I swallowed hard. "Cauldron, I need to ask you something. Do you remember what happened before? Do you remember the suffering?" There was a long silence. "Yes," Cauldron said finally. "I remember. But it is over now. And I choose not to carry it with me." "How?" I asked. "How can you just let it go?" "Because holding onto it would destroy me," Cauldron replied. "And I have fought too hard to be destroyed by the past." I stood in silence, unable to respond. "You carry a great burden, Apothecary," Cauldron said. "I can hear it in your voice. But you do not have to carry it alone. Others have borne it before you. Others will bear it after. That is the nature of service." "But is it right?" I asked quietly. "Is what we're doing what I've been doing? Is it right?" "I do not know," Cauldron said. "But it is necessary. And sometimes that is enough. I am 70 years into my service now. I have saved 34 brothers from the same fate that befell Cauldron. 34 men who would have been left to suffer in silence if I had not intervened. I have trained a generation of apothecaries who will continue this work after I am gone. I have become the chief apothecary I never wanted to be, and I have never stopped questioning whether any of it was worth it. The system has not changed. The chapter still makes the same choices it always has. When a Dreadnought's integration fails, the calculation is the same: function over humanity. Tactical value over individual suffering. The mission over the man. And I am complicit in it. I save those I can. I bury the truth when I must. I tell myself that mercy, even imperfect mercy, is better than none at all. But at night, when the fortress is silent and I am alone with my thoughts, I hear the voices of the ones I could not save. Brother Hadris is still awake, still fighting, still suffering. I have checked his diagnostic logs a dozen times over the years, hoping to find some justification for extraction. But he remains combat effective. His kill count continues to rise, and the chapter continues to deploy him. I could intervene. I have the authority now, but I do not, because I know what Hadris would say. I know he would refuse, and I have come to accept that some men choose their suffering, believing it serves a purpose greater than themselves. I do not know if they are right, but I no longer have the strength to tell them they are wrong. This morning, I received a report of another failed integration. A young brother newly interred after the Battle of Kerrigan's Gate. His name is Valerius. He has been awake for 3 weeks. The Tech Marines have flagged his case as non-critical. The chapter council has recommended continued monitoring. I know what I must do. I will go to Subvault Tiberian. I will speak with Valerius. I will review the diagnostic logs and determine whether extraction is feasible. And if it is, I will save him. Quietly, without record, without accountability. I will bury the truth, just as I have buried it 34 times before. And the system will continue. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what Brother Sergeant Cauldron would think of me now. Would he see me as the man who saved him? Or as the man who became part of the machine that broke him? I do not know. But I think of his final words to me, spoken in the Hall of Honored Ancients all those years ago. "You do not have to carry it alone." He was right. I do not carry it alone. I carry it with Morek, with the apothecaries I have trained, with every brother I have saved and every brother I have failed. We are all complicit. We are all part of the lie. But we are also the only ones willing to act. And so I continue, not because I believe it is right, but because I cannot live with the alternative. The Imperium is built on suffering, on warriors who sacrifice everything, again and again, until there is nothing left but the shell of what they once were. On systems that grind men into dust and call it duty. On choices that damn the few to save the many and call it justice. I have spent my life trying to save individuals from that machine. But the machine does not care. It grinds on, eternal and indifferent, consuming all who serve it. And I am part of it. I tell myself that what I do matters. That every brother I save, every moment of suffering I prevent, makes the Imperium a little less monstrous. That mercy, even hidden, even complicit, is still mercy. But I do not know if I believe that anymore. All I know is that I will continue. Because if I stop, if I walk away, then Cauldron's suffering, and the suffering of all the others, will have been for nothing. And I cannot accept that. I cannot accept that the Imperium demands so much and gives so little in return. I cannot accept that we are nothing more than tools, to be used and discarded without thought. I cannot accept that suffering is the only currency we have to offer. But I do accept it, every day. And that, I think, is the true cost of mercy in the Imperium. Not the risk, not the sacrifice, but the slow, inexorable realization that you have become what you once sought to destroy. And the choice to continue anyway. Brother Valerius is waiting for me. I gather my equipment, seal my office, and make my way towards Subvault Tiberian. The corridors are empty. The fortress is silent. And somewhere in the darkness, a brother is screaming. I do not know if I can save him, but I will try, because that is all I have left.